Vietnam can be split into three different sections: the north, the south, and the central. And each section of Vietnam has its own style of cuisine and its own influences. In the south, you see sweeter foods, and they're more decadent. They have a lot of garnishes. And in the central, you have food that was invented to feed royal courts, and it's amazing food. And in the north, you have these traditional dishes that are often heavily influenced by Chinese culture, things like that. They're right on the border with China up there. But some of my favorite dishes, like I really like pho. I think everyone who's had Vietnamese food would say that pho is pretty fantastic, which pho is it's a beef soup. The actual pho is a type of noodle that they add into it. Pho is the result of French influence on Asian cuisine. Vietnam was occupied by France, and during that time, these Vietnamese cooks were able to learn French cooking techniques and apply it to their own food and their recipes. And also through that, they're able to gain access to a lot of new spices and ingredients. And as they were combining these things, they invented these new dishes that really stand alone and are now staples to Vietnamese food. They're trademarks of Vietnam. In the north, I really like this one dish called bún chả. And bún chả is noodles and barbecued pork. And that sounds pretty generic, and I'm not sure how they do it, but it's a really unique dish. Like when you taste it, it's unlike anything you've ever had before, and it's really quite delicious. Desserts. Vietnamese people don't eat a lot of sugar there. It's not really a part of their diet to eat sugary foods. A lot of the desserts are things made out of like beans, or they'll serve you fruit. Hanoi is probably my favorite place in the world, and I hope that my friends in Saigon don't hear that. But I really love Hanoi. Hanoi is a city that's over 1,000 years old. It has a lot of culture to it, a lot of history, and just the feeling you get when you're living in a place with that much history. It's something that's really hard to describe. Everywhere you look, there's remnants of this really rich past. And also, when you turn your head, you see a lot of modernness. And it's a really interesting mesh of the two. I feel like in Hanoi, you can really feel the Vietnamese spirit and the culture of Vietnam. In Hanoi, you have a lot of lakes and parks and outdoor markets, and you have Vietnam's oldest university. It's the center for government and politics in Vietnam, and it's a really amazing place. And it's hard to describe using words. It's something that you really need to experience. It actually gets cold in Hanoi. Vietnamese money is in the Vietnam Dome, and about 20,000 dome makes $1. Living cost in Vietnam is much cheaper than it is in America. To buy a meal, it would usually cost you about $1 or less. Housing costs were about the same though. Living wages that employers would give out to their employees would usually be probably less than in America. I feel like all of Hanoi is like a cool relic to see. It's an interesting place, and like all the different parts of Hanoi are places where you could go explore and learn things about Vietnam just inside the city. They're all cement houses, and they're all really tall. I don't know if I remember entering a house that was less than 4 stories. It's just there. They all have multiple stories. So the city is laid out into different districts. Like the road system is a little bit of a spider web, and if you're not familiar with Hanoi, you can very easily get lost. It's interesting to see how different sections of the city are divided up, because there isn't like one commercial area and one residential area. It's all kind of mixed together, and you see people living where they work, and our next door neighbor would sell breakfast rice from her living room, and it's just kind of how the Vietnamese people have set up their neighborhoods, is that it's really close because you don't have to go out to find things. In a way, it helps you to get to know your neighbors, and you really love where you're from because you work with these people all the time, and you see them all the time, and you play with their kids. And it's a different way of life, but it's a fun one. It's rewarding. As far as crime, I'm not sure what the city does, but there was never any problem that I saw with crime. I always felt very safe while I was in Hanoi. About the rain though, sometimes if it rains hard, it will knock over thousands of trees across the city, and that causes some infrastructure problems. But the city is usually very quick at cleaning up the trees that have fallen over. It's really interesting to see just like thousands of trees knocked over in a single day. A lot of Vietnamese people like movies, but I think the most popular thing for like Vietnamese young single adults to do, they would go and they would either sing karaoke, or they would go to shops that sold like snack food, and they would just sit there and snack and talk to each other. When I first arrived in Ho Chi Minh from Hanoi, I was really shocked because I almost felt like I was back in America, just for a little bit, the first initial shock. It's a very, very modern city. It has a lot of traffic and a lot of motorbikes, and it's similar to Hanoi in a lot of ways, but I think some of the largest differences is just the size of Ho Chi Minh City is huge. There's, if I remember correctly, which I might not, I believe there's 9 million people living in that one city. So just the size of the city was massive, and there's a huge downtown area. I don't know if this is a good comparison. It felt like the Los Angeles of Vietnam, just really spread out and with millions of people and a lot of traffic. But the people in the South, they were very laid back and easygoing, and that was a part of Southern Vietnamese culture, this laid back way of life. Saigon and Ho Chi Minh are the same city. Saigon was the official name of the city before 1975, and then after 1975 it was renamed Ho Chi Minh City, but a lot of people who live in Saigon still call it Saigon. I think one defining feature of Saigon is Saigon street food. Street food is a really big thing in Ho Chi Minh City, and there are, I want to say thousands, because I feel like there's new things that I hadn't seen before. Every single day I was serving there, there was different types of beef jerky and different kinds of soups and sandwiches and meats and other Vietnamese specialties and other foods that were made up by students that are sold near schools. And it was really kind of cool because all these new dishes and all these old dishes are coming together and they're being sold at every corner. It was an interesting way to see how Vietnamese culture was represented through food just on the streets. Ho Chi Minh City, it's called Saigon because of the river Saigon, which runs through the whole city, and there are a lot of tributary rivers that go into that. And so Saigon has a lot of bridges, and some of the bridges are very, very tall, and we had the opportunity of biking over all of those bridges every single day. And sometimes those bridges were really strenuous, and I didn't like them very much at first because I would always feel really tired after biking anywhere because of all of the bridges we had to cross. But I remember one time we were biking at night and we were going over this bridge, and I saw just in the water all the reflections of the lights of the city in the river, and it was one of the most beautiful things ever, just biking around in Ho Chi Minh City at night. And that's when I started to like having bridges and having water everywhere. Ho Chi Minh is really cool because it does have a lot of ethnic cultures there. There's a Chinatown in Ho Chi Minh City. There is a Korean sector where signs are even printed in Korean, and a lot of Korean businesses in Saigon. And I think those are the two major foreign populations that live inside of Saigon, are the Chinese and the Koreans. Vietnamese is a really interesting language in that it's monosyllabic, so every word is just one syllable. Some harder to express ideas are multiple one syllables put together, and sometimes those syllables can switch places. For example, the word for cabbage can be bap gai or gai bap. They're the same thing. Vietnamese uses a system of classifiers which are used in certain situations just to like add on in front of a noun. So like a guy, like a thing, you would say gai ghế is like a chair, like chair. In Vietnamese, just about respect and talking to other people, you always have to change how you address yourself. There isn't really a word for I, it's whatever your relationship is. It's a system of titles. So when I'm talking to my little sister, I might be An. But when I'm talking to my friend, I might be Tri. When I'm talking to my mom, I'd be Gong. When I'm talking to my grandparents, I'd be Chao. When I'm giving a talk in sacrament meeting, I might use M, or as a missionary, I would sometimes use Enka. Enka is the word for elder. It was also a way of addressing yourself or another missionary. And the same goes when you're saying you. You could say bang, which is like friend, if you're on the same level as them, like if you're the same age and you're both friendly. But there's also a lot of different things you could say. Vietnamese is a tonal language, much like Chinese. You might know that Mandarin has 4 tones and Vietnamese has 6. And one way that Vietnamese has become more accessible to Americans to learn is that they have romanized their alphabet. So once you learn the alphabet, you can pretty much read any word, as opposed to Chinese where you have to learn thousands of symbols. The Vietnamese tones have all been assigned names. There's Yo Sắc, Yo Huyền, Yo Hỏi, Yo Ngã, Yo Nang, and then a level tone, Không. And these are really important when you're speaking Vietnamese, because if you use the wrong tone, then you'll be saying a different word, or you'll be saying a word that doesn't exist. It's interesting to see how me, an American, views communism and capitalism compared to a Vietnamese person. Sometimes you'll hear an American use the word communism as like a dirty word, and to a Vietnamese person, capitalist is a dirty word. It's like when somebody's talking about America, they're like, America's really cool, but you guys are too capitalist. The basic tenets that the Vietnamese people have been following is that they want to help each other out, they want to be good people, and they hope that the government can help them do that. Sometimes they see that there is some corruption in that, but they don't really support a government where we just try and get as much as we possibly can, and then don't really leave anything for the next person or give to the next person. It was really interesting to me just to see how these governmental systems were viewed by a different culture. They're officially socialist. They were communist for a while. The Communist Party is over Vietnam, but they are a socialist nation. The governmental system is really different. I remember the first way I actually experienced it was when I went to Burger King, like during my first week in Hanoi, and I didn't know how much taxes I was paying when I bought something because it's not listed. It's included in the prices, so you don't actually know how much is going to the government. But there's a lot more governmental presence in Vietnam in how they run their country. There's a lot of ceremonies. There's also a lot of policemen, and I don't feel like I fully understand how socialism or communism would affect their country fully. I feel like that's something I'm still trying to understand. One thing to note is that Vietnam's economy is currently growing very rapidly. I think that as their economy continues to grow, then we'll be able to see clearer what effects, for good or for bad, that the current governmental system will have on that. There were people who supported communism and there were people who didn't. But mostly I felt like people liked the government, but they didn't like the possibility of corruption, or if they saw any corruption, then they didn't support that. For 1,000 years, Vietnam was occupied by China, and a lot of Chinese culture was placed in Vietnamese culture. So a lot of things that are a part of Vietnam culture entered through China. Just when you look around, there's a lot of Chinese script in Vietnam. So Vietnamese is Romanized. We use an alphabet much similar to our alphabet in English, but all words in Vietnam also have a symbol that is either the Chinese symbol or is derived from the Chinese symbol. As far as the language goes, many official terms such as the word traffic or government, they come from the Chinese words for those same terms. In names, I know my Vietnamese name, it comes from 3 Chinese names. My last name is Trần, which comes from a Chinese last name, as well as my first name Chi comes from the Chinese Zhi. So it's a way, it's interesting to see how much Chinese culture has affected Vietnamese culture, and how Vietnam has been able to adopt those things and make it part of their own culture, something that they truly possess. There's a lot of Chinese foods that are popular in Vietnam, but the Vietnamese people have adapted them and changed them. But if you were to look at the 2 dishes, they would look very, very similar. As far as the Chinese people living like in Ho Chi Minh, for example, they hold much of the same social standing as a normal Vietnamese person. They usually live in their own community, and I don't believe the 2 interact too much, but there isn't ever too much of a problem except for when there's a problem between Vietnam and China. There's constantly friction between China and Vietnam, and it's not something that I was ever aware of until I was living in Vietnam. But after the Vietnamese War, China actually invaded Vietnam again, and the Vietnamese won that war. Since then, China has been a little aggressive in claiming land that Vietnam also claims, and building military bases on land that Vietnam or the Philippines also claim. And sometimes that causes some tension with the Chinese people who live inside of Vietnam, or the Chinese factories that are inside of Vietnam. So this is a song called Đi học. It's a song that children usually sing when they go to school. It talks about, from the viewpoint of a child the first time they go to school, and their mom leads them through on the trail that leads to their school in the middle of the forest. And then the second day, their mom goes back to work and they go by themselves. And it shows their confidence and their courage to go to school on their own. And this is Ni Hao. Hôm qua em tới trường, mẹ dắt tay từng bước. Hôm nay mẹ lên nương, một mình em tới lớp. Hướng dương thảm đôi váng, nước suối trong thầm thì có xòe ô che nắng ra mát đường em đi. Trường của em bé bé nạm làng giữa rừng cây ô. Cô giáo em trẻ trẻ, dạy em hát rất hay. Hướng rừng thăm đôi váng, nước suối trong thầm thì có xòe ô che nắng ra mát đường em đi.